You know what's strange about Marcus? People feel close to him very quickly. Not because he's loud, not because he's charming in some obvious way. It's smaller than that. He remembers things. The name of your dog, the story you told him 3 weeks ago about your brother, the fact that you take your coffee with too much sugar when you're stressed. He listens in a way that makes people feel seen. And for a while, relationships with him feel easy, warm, safe. Which is why nobody understands what keeps happening. Because every time someone starts getting genuinely close to him, Marcus leaves. Not dramatically, no cheating, no huge fight, no obvious reason. Just a slow shift that almost nobody notices until it's already over. And the strangest part is, he usually leaves people right when they start loving him the most. With Clara, it happened 3 months in. 1 week, he was sending her songs during the day and calling her at night. And the next week, something changed. Nothing she could point to exactly. He still replied, still showed up, still acted normal. But the warmth started thinning out. His texts became shorter. He'd read emotional messages and answer with reactions instead of words. When she reached for his hand, sometimes he'd hold it a second too late, like part of him had briefly disappeared somewhere else first. Then came the sentence people like Marcus always seem to have ready. I don't know, something just feels off. And the scary thing is, he meant it. That's what makes patterns like this so confusing. People assume someone is losing feelings, but often that isn't what's happening at all. And maybe while listening to this, someone came to mind immediately. Someone who pulled away right when things became real. Or maybe, and this is the uncomfortable possibility, maybe you recognized yourself. Maybe you've watched yourself slowly lose warmth towards someone you actually cared about and couldn't fully explain why. Maybe you felt that strange restlessness that appears the moment a relationship starts feeling emotionally safe. Not boring, safe. And somehow, that safety made you want to run. This video is about why that happens, and why people who fear losing love often become the ones who leave first. Most people look at behavior like this and ask, why would someone push away a person who loves them? But that question misses something important. Because people like Marcus don't experience themselves as pushing people away. They experience themselves as trying to escape something that suddenly feels emotionally dangerous, even if they don't consciously understand why. That's the part most people never see. Avoidant behavior rarely feels cruel from the inside. It feels necessary. And once you understand where that feeling comes from, a lot of human behavior starts making uncomfortable sense. Marcus grew up in a house that looked perfectly normal from the outside. No screaming, no obvious abuse, no dramatic childhood story people would immediately identify as traumatic. Which is exactly why he never questioned it. His father worked constantly, and when he came home, he wasn't mean, just emotionally somewhere else. Tired eyes, short answers. The kind of presence that fills a room physically, but never emotionally. His mother loved him deeply, but her love carried tension inside it. An unspoken message Marcus learned very early. Don't be difficult. Don't need too much. Don't create emotional problems. So whenever Marcus was upset as a child, he noticed something subtle happen. The atmosphere changed. People became tense, distant, overwhelmed. And children are extremely sensitive to emotional shifts adults think they're hiding. So without anyone directly teaching him this, Marcus slowly learned something. That needing people came with risk. That vulnerability created discomfort. That the safest version of himself was the version that needed the least. And this is the part that changes people quietly. Because children who stop asking for emotional needs often get praised for it. Such a mature kid, so independent, so easy. What nobody realizes is that sometimes they're not watching independence form. They're watching emotional self-protection. A child learning very early that closeness feels safest when it has limits. Fast forward 25 years. Marcus is successful, reliable, easy to like, the kind of person nobody would describe as emotionally damaged. But relationships with him follow a pattern so consistent, it almost feels scripted. At first, he's fully there, attentive, curious, emotionally open. But the closer someone gets, the more something inside him starts reacting. And what's interesting is that the reaction usually doesn't feel like fear. It feels like irritation, restlessness, doubt. He starts noticing tiny flaws that suddenly feel huge. The way she texts, the way she laughs, how often she wants reassurance. Things that never bothered him before begin feeling emotionally suffocating. And this is where many people misunderstand themselves, because they think, if I'm feeling trapped, maybe this relationship is wrong, when sometimes the relationship isn't the problem at all. Sometimes closeness itself is triggering the alarm. So people create distance, not because they stopped caring, because some older part of them learned that attachment eventually leads to pain. One of the strangest things about the human brain is that it tries to protect us using old information, even when that information no longer fits our current life. And emotional avoidance often works exactly like that. A child once learns, depending on people hurts. Being vulnerable is unsafe. Needing too much pushes people away. And years later, their adult nervous system still reacts to intimacy as if those old conditions still exist. So when someone genuinely loving enters their life, their brain doesn't only register connection, it also registers risk, which creates one of the cruelest contradictions in human behavior. The more someone matters, the more terrifying they become to lose. And sometimes, people would rather destroy a relationship themselves than wait helplessly for the relationship to destroy them first. People think fear of abandonment looks clingy all the time. Sometimes it looks like disappearing. Sometimes it looks like becoming emotionally cold right after intimacy. Sometimes it looks like suddenly feeling numb towards someone right after they say, "I really love you." Because for some people, being deeply loved doesn't only feel comforting, it also creates exposure. And exposure feels dangerous to a nervous system that learned early that closeness can hurt. So they leave first, not because they don't feel, but because they feel too much and don't know what to do with it. Marcus didn't realize any of this at 30 or 34. He realized it much later. Alone in his apartment one night after another relationship ended for reasons he couldn't properly explain. And what finally broke through wasn't therapy language. It was one sentence. The person who leaves first is often the person most afraid of being left. And something about that sentence unsettled him immediately. Because for the first time, his behavior stopped looking random. He started thinking about all the moments he lost feelings suddenly. Except now, they didn't fully look like lost feelings. They looked like panic wearing a more acceptable face. And that realization hurt. Because it meant he hadn't been protecting himself from the wrong people. He'd been protecting himself from attachment itself. Awareness doesn't magically heal patterns like this overnight. It doesn't suddenly make intimacy feel easy, but it does create something powerful. A pause. A moment where you can finally recognize what's happening before automatically running from it. Where you can stop and ask yourself, do I actually want to leave right now? Or do I just feel emotionally exposed? That question changes more lives than people realize, because healing often begins very quietly, not with dramatic breakthroughs, but with tiny moments where someone chooses not to shut down, not to disappear, not to run immediately from discomfort. And over time, those small moments become new emotional evidence that closeness is not always catastrophe, that being loved does not always end in abandonment, that vulnerability is not the same thing as danger. Marcus isn't a bad person. He's a person who learned survival rules long before he was old enough to question them. And honestly, a lot of people are. So if you've ever watched yourself pull away from someone you genuinely cared about, if you've ever confused emotional safety with boredom, if closeness has always made part of you restless, maybe there's nothing wrong with you. Maybe some part of you just learned very early that love was something you had to survive instead of relax into. And maybe healing starts the moment you stop asking, "What's wrong with me?" and start asking, "What happened to me that made closeness feel unsafe?" Because those are very different questions. If any part of this felt familiar, what's one behavior you didn't realize might be connected to fear of closeness? You can share it below. Sometimes seeing the pattern clearly is where things finally start to change.